Good morning, everybody. For those of you that don't know me, particularly those that may be online, my name is Matt Weeks, and I'm fortunate to be the lead ag intel person here at AdFarm and the moderator for this morning's discussion, which is essentially help facilitate introductions, ask some questions, and then stand out of the way so that the smart people can talk. Here at AdFarm, we like to talk a lot about the next generation of agriculture, and you really can't talk about the next generation of agriculture without really understanding who are the next generation producers, those that are coming up in the industry, those that are starting to make their mark on the industry, those that are leaving their imprint on the farm through creating businesses, through innovating new products, through helping to lead the industry in a number of different ways. And we are very, very fortunate to have three individuals who are extremely smart, extremely dedicated, and just all around good people we've found that we get to talk to today and be able to ask questions of. We obviously have a group of people here in our office. We also have some folks that are available via Zoom. We want this to be a very interactive session, so there will be questions from the audience. There'll be time for Q&A, and then anybody that is on the Zoom link, feel free to type in your questions as we have the discussion, and we'll have somebody that is moderating them and can help to address those questions. So whether you're in person or online, feel free to ask away, and we'd love to have dialogue and information from you. So with that, this morning we have three folks from a very diverse cross-section of agriculture, and who better than to introduce themselves than themselves. So Brittany, we'll start with you. If you could provide just a quick introduction, tell us a little bit about you and your operation, your farm, and what you do, that'd be great.
I am Brittany Hukill. I'm a fifth-generation farmer from Western Oklahoma in the Hydro area. My family has passed down our family farm through my dad's side of the family. He passed away when I was in high school, and so that left kind of a generational gap. My grandfather kind of stepped back in, and then when I graduated from college, I moved home to help take over the farming operation. Since that time, I am the only living generation involved in the farming operation. My mom is still around and she helps when she can, but it wasn't her dream. She married into agriculture and has stepped in ways that I will never be able to thank her, but she's passed it on to me. So we're a generational farm. And then we also have an irrigation business that sells and services center pivot irrigation systems all across the state of Oklahoma, and then about 45 or 50 miles into the surrounding states. So.
Thank you. Blake.
My name is Blake Chance. I'm from Mayetta, Kansas, right north of Topeka. I just graduated from Kansas State in May with a degree in agribusiness and a minor in entrepreneurship. Kind of entrepreneurism, I guess if you're a farmer, you're already an entrepreneur. But I took that and took some classes there, and I developed a quick pin that helps release the baler from the tractor in case there's a fire. So I started that business in college and still kind of working on it. But me and my dad, we raise cow-calf pairs, not full-time. So we have to have a full-time job, and that's kind of our part-time thing until we can ever grow it to where it can sustain us. So in addition to that, I just started a job as a warehouse manager at a farm and home store where I basically run like all the farm and ranch where we sell feeds and gates and stuff like that. So that's what I do.
Good morning. I'm Macey Hurst. I'm from mid-Missouri, so welcome. My day job is I sell print with Modern Litho Printing out of Jefferson City, kind of specializing in agricultural print, and that's actually how I came to know those folks. Is I'm also the editor of the Missouri Beef Cattleman magazine with Missouri Cattlemen's Association, and my passion for the livestock industry was dates way back. I was born and raised on a pretty good sized cow-calf operation in mid-Missouri. And then due to some family circumstances, that was kind of shut down. And then my mom and my sister and I, out of kind of the ashes of that situation, started Lady Livestock Company. So my mom, Stacy, and my little sister, Emma, and I now in mid-Missouri still raise registered Black Angus cattle. We sell a few freezer beefs a year, and then we do cow-calf as well. So that's kind of my passion project is what I call it. We've got land in 2 or 3 different counties. And then today I'm actually putting in an offer on my own piece of land. So anyway, hopefully big things for Lady Livestock Company. Yeah, it's so scary. But yeah, so livestock is kind of the sector that I get to work most in, and then communications as well.
Awesome. Well, thank you. So today's conversation will really take part in three key themes. As you can tell from the panelists, these are individuals who are involved in agriculture, but also from the business side of agriculture, from business owners to entrepreneurs to professionals that are serving the agriculture industry, as well as just individuals that probably have hopes and ideas of what the future of agriculture will be like. And so we'll really talk around those three key themes and some of the challenges, some of the opportunities, as well as just some of the dynamic changing media landscape that we're all being faced with. But kind of putting on your producer hat. So thinking about from a farm perspective, one of the things that we do within AdFarm is talk a lot about influencers. So farmer testimonials, those individuals that can help communicate a company's story in meaningful and impactful ways. I guess one of the first questions is, how important is other producers' perspectives or testimonials as you're thinking about product purchase decisions or thinking about evaluating new products? How much does that weigh into your decision-making process? Brittany?
Okay, I guess to build off of what I said earlier, we're a generational farm. So in typical situations, you would ask your dad, your grandpa, why do we do it this way? And you'd ask them questions. Well, in my case, those opportunities are not there. Those years of experience have passed away and I miss their influence greatly. However, that opens up the door. I have a handful of neighbors that I talk to frequently that are doing the same thing as I am in an area very similar to me, just a few miles one way or the other. And I really rely on their input because they've done it a lot longer than I have. And they usually have some really good advice when I'm looking for ways to expand or change things. I do trust their input because I know they are looking out for me. They really do want me to succeed. It's not a competition between me and them just because we're close and in the same field of work. They really do want to see me succeed. So I talk to my friends and neighbors quite frequently to get ideas and to bounce things off of, just because they have an idea of what's happened in years past that I don't remember. The drought of 80 whatever, or the flood of 70 whatever. I don't remember those, but they can tell me in the circumstances that they're in today, how that relates to what we've been through in the past and how to use what's available to me today to fit what's going on.
Mm-hmm.
I think, like you said, companies using advocators or people on social media, you can really tell if they're actually using the products and like it. Like certain people, they just post about it, but the people who are actually using it and when they give their opinions about it, a lot of the time they're going to be pretty honest because they're getting it for free and they want to tell their followers the truth so they can use their best judgment if it's going to work in their operation. So I think that's important to just look and you can tell by the certain influencers if they think if they would buy it or if they're using it, and then if they buy it, then you really know that they enjoy that product and that it worked for them. So it's probably going to work for you.
Yeah, I think user reviews are everything. I kind of think toward when it comes to farming and ranching, I'm not always the most typical example of a producer, but in most ways, I'm a very stereotypical 24-year-old girl. I love to shop. And when I go to Amazon or Airbnb or whatever it is, the very first place I go are to those reviews. And if the people who are buying those things don't like it, then I'm not about to spend my money on it. And that applies to farm equipment. My friends and neighbors, when I'm talking to those folks, I actually was thinking on the way up here too, where do I get information besides the reviews for products that I'm looking toward? And I also thought it was kind of social media influencers. And, like I said, if they're truly using it and they're open to answering questions about it and they're giving honest reviews, then I trust. I find those people that I trust and I follow those people on social media, and then I go to them kind of for some of that advice, as well as my friends and neighbors. And I think too that I think our generation of agriculturalists is so there's kind of a movement toward inclusivity, it's not anymore that you have to have 75 head of cattle to be considered a rancher or whatever. I think it's very much like if you have an interest in agriculture, like let's get you involved kind of thing. And so I think having those, whether it's forums or your salespeople or your locations that are just welcoming and kind of a judgment-free zone where people can come and ask questions, and maybe they're looking for a tractor, but they've never purchased a tractor. Maybe they don't know how to drive a tractor yet, but they're looking at your product, and you can put them in contact with maybe some of your previous customers that can give them those reviews and also serve as a resource to them as they enter the industry. I think those kind of connections and testimonies are the most valuable.
Yeah. So we kind of touched on social media there, which is obviously one of the themes that we'll want to talk about. You know, there's no end of social media channels and a lot of perspective as to how much social media really matters, or what are the ones that matter the most. But you talked a little bit about, you know, user reviews and getting information from social media. Maybe tell us a little bit about some of the social media channels that are most important to you, which ones you find most valuable, and you know, kind of what is the draw to those channels themselves. Macey?
Yeah. So out of all the social media right now, I spend most of my time on Instagram. I think that that is kind of like where our age group lives. I know TikTok is becoming a really big thing. I am very intimidated by TikTok. So I don't spend a lot of my time there. But I mean, I do get a lot of information there. I love that it's kind of a cowboy channel now, which I think is cool. But Instagram, I think, is a really big role. I think it's interesting too to see Facebook. So like a lot of the people, my friends and neighbors that I go to for agricultural advice are still on Facebook, just because that's kind of where their demographic lives as far as age in particular. But I think it's so interesting because I think Facebook has been very much about interpersonal connections, whereas Instagram, I think, has been about overall community building. And so like, for example, the quote unquote farm wives, the community that they've built on Instagram within each other, and then kind of tying their followers to each other, is just a place where I think a lot of people, again, feel really included. And so I really like to kind of find and plug into those communities on Instagram. Also a big fan of LinkedIn. Just as a professional, I look for a lot of career, whether it's career advice or companies that I want to keep my eye on or work with or whatever that is. That's a big resource for me as well.
I think they all really have their own benefits and advantages. Facebook, you have like all the groups, and you can just kind of specialize in one thing. Like our company that I work for, trying to look into like agriculture drones and stuff. So just get on there and learn about it, and just see all the people that are actually using it, and you can see kind of what works for them and what doesn't. And then Twitter, there's a lot of like farmers on Twitter trying new things, and they can just thread everything, and a lot of good discussions happen on there, I think. And then TikTok, it's very addicting, but it's kind of a bad deal. But also I found like there are farmers that sit out there and talk, and they're talking about their new ideas, and you can actually see what they're doing and while they're talking about it, which I think is nice. And like one guy, he gets a lot of hate for stuff, and I was talking to our agronomist, and a lot of these people trying new things and doing new stuff, he said everybody kind of seems like the tree hugger type of farmer. Well, that's kind of where we're gonna have to go, I think, to keep going, and to get everybody to I don't know, put a better name on agriculture. We're gonna have to do things better, and people are gonna get hate at first, but once people realize that it works, he's not gonna look as crazy as people think he is now, I think. So it's cool for everybody to see somebody else's perspective.
Yeah.
I think just like you mentioned, they each have their own different use. Like each social media platform, I think, has its own use. I use Instagram more as making, like you said, connections, Macey. I use that to find other farm wives or farm moms that are doing the same thing I am or similar things, and make a connection with them. And I also see what products and things they're using in their life that make their life a little bit easier. I think for me, I also still use YouTube, like for deep dives. When I get to the point that I'm really interested in a product, I really go and it's like, okay, find YouTube videos of somebody talking through this, looking at either a piece of equipment or a chemical or seed or certain applications of things. And I I use YouTube more as like a deep dive situation to really do research. At that point, I'm like spending hours, which is not fun sometimes, but to really do the research behind making a purchase or making a decision on a farm, that's what that avenue is used for. And then, like you mentioned, the groups on Facebook, like I think I use that as kind of just like a wide cross section of that's the 5th post I've seen about that certain item or that certain thing. Okay, like what is that? And go dig deeper into it. And you kind of just, it can be a lot of information on Facebook in those groups. And sometimes I wish my husband would stay off of it and I would have a way easier life on purchasing things. But it's nice to see a wide cross section from all over a region or all over agriculture and see what people are using in certain scenarios. So yeah, they each have their own.
Yeah. So you guys mentioned a lot of different social media platforms, right? For YouTube, TikTok, Instagram, Facebook. Do you find that there is one that you gravitate to, or do you try to be on each one, kind of certain amounts of during the day, or just for specific reasons, or how do you kind of weigh each of those platforms? I'll open that one up to anybody who wants to take.
So I am the worst when it comes to Instagram. It's like the first thing I check in the morning and the last thing I check before I go to bed, which I hate about myself, but I do it anyway. So as far as like posting times, that's when you can find me. But and then Facebook, I find that I just kind of tune into like when something is speaking to me directly. Like for example, in a group, if there's something that like I'm really monitoring and I can turn on the notifications for that group, if there's a conversation I want to be a part of or want to hear about, then Facebook kind of gets me just whenever it has something I feel like is beneficial. And then yeah, LinkedIn is kind of the same way. But yeah, I think that first thing in the morning, last thing at the end of the day.
I'd say when I was advertising hard for my quick pins and stuff, TikTok's one time in a week I sold like 30 quick pins just because one of my TikToks blew up and people were posting a bunch of comments, either hating it or liking it. And it helps me, sell a bunch of them. So kind of just say like, it just depends what I'm looking for. But TikTok is just, you never know what's going to pop up. You're going to find something new that interests you. Or if I know what I'm looking for, like Facebook groups, I can go right to it and look at cattle, look at drones, or whatever. I can search it right there. And then Twitter, there's just if you want to read about what the new farmers are trying out and kind of see how that's going, that's what I do.
Mm-hmm.
I really think like if you look at time breakdown, it really just depends on what my goal is for the day to get out of that. If I'm just scrolling, I'm probably on Instagram. If I'm looking for something, I'm probably either in a Facebook group or looking on YouTube or looking like specifically for something. So it really just depends on like what I'm looking to get out of it at that time. I don't really know that there's a set, like I spend this much time on each thing.
Do you find that there's certain times of the year then that maybe you're on YouTube more? Are there like key time, planting or harvest, or are there certain times?
I noticed, you speak of that, during the winter when we're in like deep repairs, I find myself on YouTube way more trying to figure out how to get something apart. Like, where's the parts diagram, or figure out how to get, so yeah, I think there's certain times that you use it more or look for things more.
Right.
I will say too, I think like made a good point about Twitter. I always forget Twitter exists until I'm looking for like quick news. And then it's the first place I go. Like Tom Brady came out of retirement, I'm on Twitter immediately. Like I want to hear about it. And so if it's like a launch or something, and I think Twitter has a really good like ag chat community as well. So yeah, if that's a place where you want to get information out like fast, but in small bites enough to where I get on your website to read more, I think Twitter is a really good resource too.
Yeah.
Especially like after farm shows and stuff, and all the farmers are talking about what they saw and what they liked.
Does that tend to be a time that you're looking for information after farm shows on Twitter just to kind of see what the talk was?
Well, yeah. If I didn't get a go, then all those guys. That was probably a month ago now. They had the Husk or Harvest Days, and then Farm Progress, and a lot of those big guys that are big on social media. They all go to it. They're friends with each other, and then they talk about basically what they saw, what they liked, and how it went.
Oh, good. So Blake, I want to ask you specifically about Instagram. So we've talked about this a little bit before, but on your personal account, you have over 41,000 followers on Instagram. I guess kind of two quick questions. A, was that intentional? And how did you do that?
So I was kind of I've always been into ag, but I was really just a tractor nerd in high school. And my buddy was like, you should just start one posting pictures of your tractors. And I started that in high school. And then I just started posting about farm stuff and meeting people from all over the United States and other countries. And then I used that as like my my SAE and FFA, and did like a communications. It's been so long, I can't even remember what it was called, but I did stuff through FFA with it, and won some awards through that with FFA, and just grew it and kept posting farm stuff and our international tractors, because I'm a big fan of that. And it just happened. So and I used that really helped me get the quick pin going. A lot of support from my followers selling those, and it's been nice to get product out, and then asking people what they think when I have ideas and stuff like that. So it's worked out good.
So maybe where do you see that audience growing to, or is there a plan to continue to grow? You've obviously used it as a kind of feedback forum, so you can ask them questions, have dialogue. Certainly, you've promoted your business, Any Case Supply, as a possible channel. But where do you see that evolving to?
I plan to just keep it hopefully growing and posting more as I'm back home now, not in college, and doing stuff on the farm and trying out new practices, and just communicating with other farmers to see what they're doing to better our farm, so we can be sustainable and grow.
Yeah. Do you find that there are more posts or posts that are more popular than others, or is there kind of a theme to what people seem to gravitate to?
Yeah, I mean, when you post videos of more stuff that's, I guess just doing stuff that's different and out of the ordinary, like sometimes just be unrolling hay and doing stuff old school, or stacking square bales and stuff that people don't see very often. It's kind of what people like to see. So, and we do things old school sometimes, so we're a little different.
Yeah. Brittany and Macey, kind of the same question. Are there certain platforms that you think you're going to be prioritizing in the future, or kind of where you think you'll be spending more time than others, either from a kind of personal or business perspective?
Yeah, I think with having been ranching with my mom and little sister, we reach women most of the time on Instagram, and young women specifically that are going into the stages of their lives where they're making the buying decisions for their families. A big part of our mission is just advocating about beef and the cattle industry. And so whenever we can have those conversations and kind of ease some of those worries about where it is that their beef is coming from, what it is they're putting on their families' tables, Instagram is really where we find that community. On the same token, we find our customers on Facebook, because a lot of them are maybe middle-aged, and they live in our community and they want to fill their freezers with beef, whereas it seems like some young people are still trying to decide, like, if that's the route they want to go, if they want to buy local beef, or what that experience is like. And so having good conversations on both, finding customers on both. Again, on Instagram, I think we kind of find more of that community feel, like people comment, people DM us. The best performing post we ever made was when that whole trend came out. We posted like, he's a 10, but he likes his steak well done, or whatever. And which, no judgment, if you're eating beef, you got my support. But so it's kind of more that casual community versus like having to have kind of like a corporate front that I think all of marketing really seems to be leaning towards in a lot of way. And so yeah, we like those connections on the two. Again, like Twitter for our business doesn't really perform that well, because we're trying to speak, of course we want to speak kind of globally about women in agriculture and where your beef comes from and all that kind of thing. But like Twitter is, like I said, for me, a news source. So we're not sharing any breaking news. So we don't put as much time into Twitter, but Instagram and Facebook have been good to us.
I would say Facebook is, again, like where our customers live. I feel like my customers in the irrigation business are mostly over 50, mostly wear overalls, mostly have gray hair that's real short. And so they don't necessarily get a lot of their, they don't necessarily get a lot of their information from social media, I would say. So that's, I feel like, a disconnect for me and my business on the irrigation side. However, on the farming side, we are branching out our seed wheat business into a whole wheat flour, direct to consumer production kind of operation, and be able to sell flour directly to local people, which that marketing will move back towards like Instagram and some Facebook, but I think a lot of it will be more in those channels. So while I have somewhat focused on Facebook in the past, it hasn't been very critical for the products we're selling. Most of that is made like in person at farm shows, through radio ads, through newspaper. Like my demographic for the irrigation business is still the old school media. And so now moving into a flour that I want wives to buy or moms to buy, to keep in their kitchen, that's a whole different ballgame of who I'm marketing to. And that's going to move more towards social media than any business I've had in the past. So
Cool. We've mentioned farm shows in a couple different, conversations. I guess, the question would be, do you still find farm shows to be valuable? There's certainly a number of shows out there, and they're starting to come back after the COVID pandemic. Attendance is hopefully going to start to come back a little bit. But are farm shows a part of, as you think about your marketing, or even as you're getting product information, how important are farm shows in that conversation?
I would say for us, most of our farm shows are Thursday, Friday, Saturday. Friday at noon, I'm like, why did we spend the money to come here? This is ridiculous. Friday at 5 o'clock, I'm like, I don't know that we'll do this again. And then Saturday, we usually get 2 or 3 leads that end up panning out. And I'm like, okay, fine. But it's miserable the first day and a half to 2 days because the traffic's just not there. I think a lot of farm shows in our area, especially in Oklahoma, we go to 3 or 4 different shows. They're not farmers anymore. It's retired people. It's city people who are looking for something fun to do, and they saw a billboard about a farm show, and so they show up and they want pins and they want all this, which is fine, but that's not who I'm there to sell to. So I think going forward, and my mom and I kind of had this discussion when I filled out our paperwork to go to next year's farm shows, that maybe we just need to change. Maybe we need to set up our booth in a different way than we have in the past, where yes, we're selling a product, but we just want to tell you about what we're doing and use it more as an education tool instead of a marketing the product tool, which kind of stinks because you're just wasting, like, the booths are expensive, but that's not the demographic that is coming for the most part those first few days. So maybe we just shift and just tell our story to the people who are coming through. So maybe they do understand a little bit more of where their food comes from, instead of trying to push our product and just sitting there all day looking at people who really have no use for an irrigation system. So I think for us, it's probably going to end up shifting a little bit if we do keep the farm shows, but it's a toss up for us most of the time on whether we keep them or not, especially after the last few years.
Right. Blake and Macey, I guess from that aspect, as a producer, are there farm shows that you always regularly want to attend or find to be valuable to you? Are there ones that you just feel like you can't miss, or how do you prioritize those during farm show season?
I think farm shows, I always enjoy seeing new things and going to them. But when I had my own product at one and trying to afford the show, and my own product came right during COVID in April, and COVID hit in February. So it's kind of bad timing. But the farm show, I think the farm show scene hadn't got back to where it was yet when I was going to those farm shows. And like you said, maybe hitting them differently and educating them. But for me to be able to sell enough product to pay for that was really tough. And then for me to go to like the big farm shows where I think I would sell more product, well, they'd cost that much more. So it's pretty tough, but I'll always enjoy going to farm shows like Husker Harvest Days and seeing new product, and then talking to people who have had that product and used it. And then the people who say, well, it doesn't really work. So you learn a lot and just see a lot of people and learn a lot of new things, I think.
So speaking as a producer, kind of on the farm show side, and then because I am a sales executive, I do a lot of trade shows as an exhibitor on the print side. I love trade shows, all of them. And I am such a people person, as far as like, I will consider a relationship I have with somebody on your team before I'll consider your product, which is maybe crazy, but like if I'm at a trade show and I end up in a New Holland booth and you have a salesperson that I just really click with, and like I want to talk to them more, than when I'm needing a tractor, they're going to be the first person I call. So I think that those relationships again are so valuable. And I keep using the word community, but I think agriculture, I've worked in the insurance industry, communications industry, marketing industry, but I think the agriculture industry is far more of a community than it is industry. And those relationships are valued to such an astronomical extent that, again, I think that even, if you don't get to sell something at that show, the relationships that you build and the people that you meet there will pay dividends in the future.
You mentioned that. I think that's also part of why, like Saturday at 4 o'clock, as I'm packing the boxes, it's like, yeah, but if I don't come, I miss seeing all those people, and those people are still looking for me to be there. So yeah, I think the personal connection you make at farm shows is part of the reason why you stick it out and carry boxes of stuff in and haul it.
Trudge boxes.
Yes.
Yeah. I want to shift gears just a little bit and talk about brand loyalty. We talk a lot about brand loyalty and what does that mean? I've heard it mentioned in a couple different ways, and a lot of it comes down to relationships and that perception of what brands are able to offer and just some of the goodwill that they're able to do. Maybe talk a little bit about, do you find yourselves being brand loyal? Does brand loyalty mean the same thing to you as it maybe did your parents or the older generation? Kind of what's your thoughts in terms of brands that you're loyal to and what they can do to support that loyalty?
So I think, and I feel like I just keep repeating myself, but I'm really loyal to people.
Yeah.
If, again, like if you have a sales rep that has just been really good to me, then I'm going to do my best to do business with that person. Or if I really believe in the values of your brand, I'm going to try to do business with your brand. And I think, if there's a brand that I've been using and it's been super consistent and super reliable, that's a big deal. But then if you have a phenomenal product and the sales rep I'm dealing with is just difficult, then like I'm going to look elsewhere. So I think that, again, that community is such a big deal, specifically to agriculture. But I think that building a community within your own brand, making sure that you represent the values of your target market and that you communicate kind of the emotion behind your mission, I think people resonate with that and want to be part of that.
Well, I'm very brand loyal. We've had red machinery in our family since my great grandpa was farming. And that's probably not a good thing, the John Deere dealers, probably better than our international dealers. And the John Deere community is great. They have great products. I'm just not a John Deere guy. But John Deere has done way better with marketing and everything. And I will tell everybody that. They just have relationships and they have people that support their products. And that's why they're the best company, the biggest company in ag. So they've done things right. But I'm just a red guy, and I'm going to be loyal to the brand that I like and that's done me well. So, but I will tell everybody that John Deere has done great with everything they do in marketing because they're just phenomenal, and they build relationships and they have a great network, and that's why they're number one.
I think for me, I'll tell a little bit of a story. When my husband and I first started dating, we went home and I was like, oh, I need an oil change. And he was like, where do you go to get an oil change? And I told him, and he goes, well, how much does it cost? And I was like, I have no idea. And he was like, you don't know how much it costs to get your oil change? I'm like, no, but the guy's nice and they do a good job and I've never had trouble and it's fine. And he was like, I bet they're way overcharging you. You need to go ask. And I was like, okay, whatever. I'm just going to take my vehicle, get an oil change, and we're going to go on. So I got the receipt and I walked back in and I tossed it to him and he was like, well, that's not bad. And I'm like, okay, I don't know. They just do a good job. So I feel like, yes, I am brand loyal. I'm loyal to the people that make that product or that service or whatever it is work. Because at the end of the day, I want something that's dependable, but I also want dependable people who are going to stand up for what the services they provided and the products they provided if something does go wrong. Because I know if I had an oil change before we drove to Kansas City, I know if something went wrong and I went, hey, that wasn't right, and I pull in, Bobby's going to walk out and go, what's up? How can I make it? Fix it? How can I make it right? What can I do? And I know that there's a service side behind that that's going to stand by what I've chosen to invest my money in and who I've chosen to support with my dollars. So I hope the same is said for the businesses that I run, that I can produce something that is a quality product, but they also know if there's a problem, they can call me and go, hey, something's up, and that I'm going to be there as soon as possible to get it fixed and make a quality product even better with the service side. So for me, I think it's kind of a two-sided. I want a good product, but the people and the service behind it is what's actually going to sell it when there's a problem.
Yeah. So speaking of that, on the business side of things, do you find that brand loyalty is changing within your irrigation business? Are
Oh,
people
definitely.
not as brand loyal as maybe what they were, or just how is that changing?
I would say just our product is typically higher than our competitors in price. We make up for it in service because I would say I don't see most of our customers within a year just because they don't need service, they don't need parts. So I think we have a better product and I try and sell that. But a lot of the time right now, especially with how tight things are and just the way that most people are running their operations, there's not a lot of extra money to be had. So when I provide a quote to a farmer and he's got 3, he goes 1, 2, 3, slowest one, take it. And they feel bad. They call me and say, I really wish we could have gone with you, but we just can't on price. And I, at the same time, can't go give things away for free or I won't be in business. So I think it has shifted. And then those same guys call me to work on their stuff that's a different brand. So there's kind of a trade-off there. They want to do business with me, but the price is a huge point right now just because they're operating on such thin margins. And I know that, and I try and understand that. It's also hard when you lose sales because you're trying to provide a good product and it does just cost more.
Yeah. Are there things that you're doing to help, build back that brand loyalty, or other things that you can do other than just competing on price?
I mean, yes, a lot of it right now has fallen to service, just that when they need something, trying to be there to be able to pick the pieces up no matter what machine they have. And then eventually those machines wear out and hopefully I get a chance to quote a new one. And sometimes it's just how it falls, but they do still call. So something's working out.
Yeah, good. We've talked a little bit about, folks that you look to for, product recommendations or advice. Blake, you mentioned agronomists. A lot of times we talk about those within the context of who those trusted advisors are for farmers and for producers. Maybe just give us a sense of, when you think about a trusted advisor, who are those people that come to mind that you value their recommendation, you turn to them for, if you need expert advice or help. And understanding it'll be different for all of your operations, but maybe who are some of the folks that when you would say, I trust their advice and guidance, who would those individuals be?
I think, like you said, the agronomists, people who are educated in that field that went to school and work with it every day. But as well, my dad's always told me, like, he always talks and spend time with the older guys that have done it and they've lived through it. And you can see that they've had success. And I mean, don't have many of those guys left. And whenever I get the chance to talk to them, I try to just listen because I mean, clearly they've done something right. And I mean, they just have a wealth of knowledge that a lot of people our age, they just don't have yet. And we have to live like they've lived to get that. And I just try to sit down and listen and get all I can out of older farmers and just people like that, because they've done everything and they've seen everything. They went through the cycles and they're not always right either, but a lot of the time they know.
Yeah. Macey?
Yeah, I think we've talked a lot about social media and I think it is so important. But kind of like Blake said, and like I've said 12 times now, I think the interpersonal connections within agriculture with those friends and neighbors and, your other customers are really kind of like our first resource. Kind of, like Blake said, when I go to the sale barn, I grew up in the sale barn and I would sit by my grandpa every chance I got because he'd been doing it 3 times as long as I'd been alive. And, he just knew all of the things. And then I would, if I went to MFA, I would talk to the guy behind the counter for hours because he knew all of the things. Or, the woman that was, my mom, for example, she wasn't raised in agriculture, but she's been doing it longer than I've been alive. And she is such a wealth of knowledge and such a businesswoman. And so just going to those places and finding kind of like a support system, I think is so important too. I think as young people, it can be really intimidating to enter the agriculture industry, especially if you weren't born and raised in it. But finding people that support you and want to be on your team and want to see you succeed. I come from a town of 200 where people sometimes spooks people to see a young woman in agriculture, and we're getting there. But so it's so nice to kind of collect a a team of people who are just really there to help you succeed and want to pour into you and want to answer all your questions, no matter how silly they might be. And then, they're great for those product recommendations, or maybe they loan you a piece of equipment and you become loyal to that piece of equipment because, that's what you grew up learning to drive or whatever that might be. So yeah, those communities, those connections, super important.
When I think of like the neighbors around me that farm close to me, I can't think of one who would want me to fail. And I can't think of one who would give me advice knowing it was the wrong thing, like to tell me something incorrect in hopes that it would damage me in some way. Like none of the people that I can think of would do that. And I think sometimes we get it in our heads that there's other people and they're like our competitors because they're sending grain to the same elevator we are, or they're sending cattle to the same sale barn we are, so that somehow we're in competition. But I don't, when you really sit down and think of it, there's nobody that's actually out to be your direct competitor. They want to help. So yeah, a lot of it is neighbors that I call and just ask questions to, or I've got a cousin that he doesn't live close, but he farms and he knows a lot. So we call him and go, okay, what about this chemical? And he goes, well, I sprayed it one time and it didn't do like it said it would do, and it didn't last. So I wouldn't waste your money. And I trust those people just because they have the real experience. For me, a lot of those connections are people I actually know in real life. But with how things are shifting, as far as technology and communication, I think those connections and those people that you call are going to be more of a message and be people that maybe you haven't met in real life, but that you know of who have used the product, and shift more to kind of the virtual community in terms of who you rely on.
So speaking of that virtual community, certainly social media is a way to connect with those individuals, but are there, like-minded farmers or in different areas that you find yourself working to connect with through conferences or, through other kinds of events, or, how do you broaden that network from beyond just your neighbors?
So personally, my husband and I are chairman of our state Young Farmer and Rancher Committee in Oklahoma. And the connections we have made through that committee in our state are great. But we go to national conferences 2 or 3 times a year and meet up with young farmers and ranchers from all across the nation. And then you start to gain little pieces of friendships from all over, that they may grow a completely different crop, but they at least know what I'm going through. They at least know what's going on. So those committees and organizations that we are part of allow us to have and build those connections that we use all the time. I had a truck driver coming through Kansas, and I was like, he called and he said, I didn't just have a blowout, I lost like the pin that holds the leaf spring together. Like I can't replace that. And he wasn't gonna be able to just go get another one. It wasn't gonna be that easy. And I was like, well, I know a guy in Kansas. Hold on, let me see if he can get there. So I call a guy. He said, nope, wrong side of the state, but let me call this other guy. And within 2 phone calls, somebody was there with a grade 8 bolt to get him to the next stop. So it's not like, it's great that I knew somebody from Kansas, but those connections put me in touch with who I actually needed in Kansas that lived 2 miles from the exit he was at. So it forms a community by being involved in those organizations that I wouldn't have had otherwise.
Yeah. Yeah. Blake and Macey, like other organizations that you're involved with that provide more of a kind of national context to some of those relationships?
Well, as I started out at ag and FFA, that helped me go meet so many people. And then once I got to college and I started my own business, all the people that I met in FFA were wanting to help me out with that. And then all the people I met at college, just that helped me expand my network. And I mean, I met a farmer in college. He came from Paraguay, and like we're so similar, but he was 20 hours away on an airplane down south, but they farmed rice and had cattle. And I mean, we had so much in common, but we were that like, how'd we ever meet and stuff like that. And just being able to talk to them about how they do stuff down there, and just, it's cool to see that. But yeah, I think through social media and just in college, meeting all those people and trying to broaden your horizons, and people are always going to try and help you. And they remember you trying to get somewhere, and they're going to help you when you need help. Like you said, make an extra phone call for you, because it always helps to show people you care about what you're doing, because they're going to want to help you succeed.
Yeah.
Brittany's story kind of made me laugh because not all that long ago, a guy who's now a really close friend of mine, who I met at an NCBA cattlemen's convention. He was from Nebraska. He lived in Nebraska at the time, drove down to Missouri for a bull sale. He got out of his truck and his contact fell out. So he called me and he was like, "Do you know anyone?" So yeah, just having those connections kind of all over the country is such a unique experience that I think a lot of those organizations do allow you to do. Missouri Cattlemen's Association, I've been a member for years, a staff member for a couple years. Those local organizations are so important to tuning into your state and your neighbors. But then also, yeah, NCBA, Farm Bureau, Young Farmers and Ranchers, also a big fan of being able to connect to like-minded individuals, but also individuals who are doing things so different from you, and you can kind of feed into each other's learning and pour into each other. Those organizations are super important. And I love that we're getting to do those face-to-face things again. Although I do think that those virtual communities are still such an important thing. Because kind of, like Brittany said, there are people on Instagram who I consider close friends of mine who I've never met. But now that we're starting to get to, travel a whole lot more and all that, like I'm going to Montana next week and there are some people up there that I'm like, hey, we're like basically best friends, but we've never met. Like, you want to get coffee? And so stuff like that. It's a unique benefit, I think, of social media and kind of the real world coming together.
Yeah. So taking a little bit of a different path, there's a number of different initiatives, and we've talked a lot about social media. When you think about marketing, there's a lot of noise out there. But as you think about great marketing, what are some of the things that come to mind? So maybe it's, a marketing piece that's particularly relevant or impactful, or what do you appreciate most from companies that are sending you information or wanting to get your attention? What are some of the things that stand out to each of you?
I like the companies that kind of show their personality and get on the video and are just goofy and fun and showing off their product like they love it. That's really what you want to see. Somebody that knows their product and is in all the way, like 100% committed to it. I work with a company selling like Outback Wrap. And those ladies, they just post about everything and make funny videos and some wild music in the background. It just makes people, probably makes me want to go buy it. And it works. And they get other influencers that kind of have that same vibe to go to work with them. And it's just cool to see them. And then those influencers come to the farm show they're at and they make videos together. I just think it's cool. And it kind of attracts more attention. So, and shows that they care about their own product.
Shows a little bit of personality.
Yeah.
Macey, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, like made a good point. I think about like Wendy's, how they're constantly roasting people on social media. I love that. They also make a mean burger, so that helps. But yeah, companies where, again, like they kind of have their own brand identity. They fully embrace it. If it is super goofy, if it's a little bit edgy, I love that. I find that I was shocked whenever I bought a house a couple years ago, and I remember like my parents getting junk mail and all that stuff, and then I bought a house and I started getting all these mailers, and then I started using all those coupons that they were sending me, or discount codes online, or like BI, Beringer Ingelheim, like, and Merck both, I think, do this, like, take our survey and we'll send you a pair of work gloves, and like I'm in every time. And so I also work for a company that produces mailers, so maybe I'm biased, but so I find that those things, like when I feel like they speak directly to me, I can respond to the call to action kind of on my time. Also, whenever it's just what I call like guerrilla marketing, like when I get on Instagram, they're there. When I get on Facebook, they're there. When I open my mailbox, they're there. When I turn on Hulu, like they're there. And those things, you can't help but click on the link or whatever. But yeah, whenever it's a company that I feel like I know the person, or that like I would have a really good laugh with their marketing specialist or whatever that might be, those are fun ones to connect with and make me want to patronize their business.
Yeah.
I feel like there's been kind of a shift. So there was like a time when ag ads were like stupid, cheesy, and almost offensive to actual agriculture because they made it look like we were stupid. And then we went to like extremely accurate and like straight, like laced, and don't say the wrong thing, and this is us, and we're going to put a really polished face. And I'm hoping that we shift into a realistic approach to presenting agriculture that's accurate for the people who don't know what agriculture is or who are learning where their food comes from, but that's also realistic enough that it's humorous to the people who are in it, because ag is funny sometimes. Like there are a lot of things that are humorous or that you just have to laugh at or else you'll cry because it's ridiculous. But I'm hoping we move into a phase where you can kind of have the best of both worlds, make some fun and make light and enjoy the lifestyle that agriculture provides and the flexibility that it has and all of the things that make agriculture what we love, but also present a well-rounded face to the people who aren't in agriculture, so that they know where their food comes from in a professional way, but to still have fun with it. Because I think a lot of people are looking for the laughs now and kind of the, hey, I remember that because. So I think there's got to be a balance as we move forward.
Yeah.
Kind of on that note too, Brittany, you made me think of a lot of the commercials I've been seeing lately, and I think specifically like Super Bowl commercials have been so hard hitting emotionally when it comes to agriculture. Whether like a lot of vehicle truck companies are really good about that. Tractor companies have been really good about that lately. And I love that because I think for so long, agriculture has been kind of going at consumers from like an economical standpoint. And it's, like our product is the best price or, whatever that might be. And so I think coming at it from an emotional level, because so many of them are approaching agriculture from an emotional level, and so many people inside agriculture have such deep emotional ties to the industry that I think that is kind of a unique approach. And I think we're reaching a lot of people outside of the industry like that too. Whenever they see that we're not just in it for the money, there's a lot of emotion that goes into the crops and the livestock and the land for us as well. So kind of, again, though, I think that goes along the same lines as like the laughing and the personalities and just helping people kind of understand the emotion, whatever that emotion is behind your brand.
Brittany, you touched on a few things that you didn't like. And so maybe that's a great segue into just pet peeves, right? What are some things that you see from companies that you're like, I please don't do this? Or, what are some things that you just don't need to see anymore?
I mean, I would hope that my profession is treated with as much respect as someone in a different profession. I think it's easy, like, oh, they're just out feeding animals or driving a tractor in circles. Like, that's not me.
Yeah.
And so I definitely want the professionalism that we give a lot of other professions to be demonstrated in agriculture. But I also want other people to know that agriculture is special, and that if we were doing it just for the money, we would have quit a long time ago. So that there is like that emotional tie that we all have to agriculture, or seriously, we would have quit. Like, I want them to know that and not make light of that is a really important part of who we are. But to have that balance, I guess.
Yeah.
I think like when we talked about on the Zoom last week where there's that sprayer and it had like all the drift, on the spray. Well, then there's the thing, that's not even a tractor and sprayer here in America. It's like European, and you got all these pictures of companies that might have this tractor. It's like you sell tractor parts, and it's not even you don't even sell parts for that tractor because we don't have them here in America. That's just one of the things. Like, I think you're going to capture more attention if you put something on there that your people buying your product actually have, so they see it and they're like, oh, I might need something for that. That's something I think is kind of a pet peeve for me. Or like there's corn grow here, but if you put like the wrong crop or something that's not grown where your consumers are, then it's not going to capture their eye because they don't think they need anything for it.
Right.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. And I think ag to ag marketing is a lot better about that than like ag to consumer marketing as far as just the accuracy. Because as a farmer or rancher, like that can be kind of frustrating to see something, and like it was painful when my family started watching Yellowstone, and you start picking out all those inaccuracies, or like who shaped that hat. Those cattle are awfully fat for like mountain ranch cattle, and so just little stuff like that. But again, ag to ag I think is a lot better about that, because a lot of times it's real ag people who are making those commercials. The thing that probably gets to me the absolute most is pinning different pieces and parts of agriculture against each other. I remember, I think it was 2 Super Bowls ago, Michelob Ultra put out a commercial, and it was like, for every bottle of Mich Ultra you buy, we convert 1 land of conventional agriculture into organic agriculture. And I know they're not an ag company, but that was so frustrating to me, because now our consumers are like, well, we have to be buying organic because we're trying to shift everything from conventional. There's something wrong with it. And that is so frustrating. And I think if you have a product that is specifically for organic or specifically for conventional, that's fine to advertise that. But there's a difference between informing people about your product and making other pieces of agriculture look bad because it doesn't fit your product target market.
I think that also applies to product labeling, like just to have an extra little medallion on the label that says something that makes no sense, like frustrates me to no end. Like you got no useful piece of information by adding that to the label other than you have this shiny little sticker on the
To
side
produce more
that says,
sales.
yeah. Which just confuses people, which I think is really frustrating to me.
Yeah, there's a lot of education that needs done still about consumer labels and stuff like that.
But Macey, I did think you made a good point. Ag to ag marketing, there's so much more flexibility because we can take things with a grain of salt that general consumers can't. Like there's things that you can do, and that opens up a little bit of possibility.
No. You've each talked a little bit about reaching consumers themselves, right? And as you develop new products or as you expand your businesses and talking to consumers. Maybe just give us a little bit of a sense of what are some of the platforms that you think is going to be most effective in reaching those consumers, or is that going to be more of a focus for you even going forward into the future? Is, you know, extending that message not only to your customers, but to the ultimate consumer going to be more of what you're going to try to do in the future?
I think that is such an ever evolving area. You know, I think there's a few things that'll be around forever and ever. Like, for example, I still read magazines. It's a huge part of what I do from a day-to-day basis, but I don't think that that's going anywhere. I listen to the radio all day, every day, starting to get into podcasts. So I think there's certain kind of forms of communication that will be around forever and ever. You know, when it comes to social media, I think it's kind of the right place, the right time, or a specific demographic. Like, for example, I'm not going to put any time into advertising on Snapchat because like high school students aren't my target market, but in a lot of other ways, you know, if I am again trying to reach like the young moms, I'm going to spend time on Instagram. That used to be Facebook, and that's still a great place to advertise, but it's a shifting demographic. And so I think not unlike other industries, it's an ever evolving kind of field, and you kind of have to really truly know your target market and where they can be found.
Yeah, I tried newspaper, trying to sell my product, and like you said, you got to find your target market and see where your consumers are. And a lot of mine were younger and on social media, and that's where I found most of my sales. But like you said, the older people are still reading the newspaper. My dad, we still get the newspaper, but I mean, you get much younger than them. There's a lot of people not getting the newspaper anymore. So you really just got to find and see what works and go from there. But I think social media is going to be huge. And then finding the right podcasts. I know a lot of people and farmers that are starting to listen to podcasts. So being able to advertise on there, if you know that there's a certain type of farmer that's on there that might like your product.
I think it really just depends where we're focusing. Like, I'm not going to go sell a center pivot in Michigan. Like, that's just not anything I want to have to do. So I have to focus my advertising into the state of Oklahoma. And then I do sell pivots to younger producers. But a lot of those younger producers are finding me on Facebook or just on Google. Like, if they type it in, I've got to have my website pop up on Google and be kind of at the top of that listing. So those are where I get my irrigation. But as I was saying earlier, shifting into grinding our own wheat and selling it as flour, that's a whole different group. I'm not selling flour to my pivot customers. I mean, I'm sure they would buy some, but they're going to toss the bag at their wife and say, hey, I got you this. And they're going to go, gee, thanks. Like, it's not the same as if the wife would have found the product and bought it for herself to use in whatever way she wants to. So the marketing for those two are going to be completely different, probably using different social media channels. And I probably wouldn't advertise my flour on the radio, but I do need radio ads for the irrigation business just because they listen to the market report at whatever time on their way into town. And if my ad comes in after it, they remember that I'm there. So
I will say one other thing, agree with all of that. Something else that came to mind was sponsorships of organizations that your members or your customers are members of. If I see, whether it's NCBA or Missouri Cattlemen's Association or a T-ball game that a local company sponsored, and it's going to cost me $5 more to buy from them or to get my oil changed there, I'm going to go there because they support my community, they support the people in my industry, they support my lifestyle. So I think those, although a lot of times pretty big investments, can pay off.
So you mentioned podcasts, which is a great question. You know, we're certainly going to talk about new media opportunities, and podcasts are continuing to gain traction. It's easier and easier to consume that information. And everybody has an iPhone or a smartphone, so you know they're able to subscribe to podcasts and listen to them. What are some of the podcasts that you guys are listening to? Do you appreciate the podcast? Do you see yourself listening to more? And which ones are you starting to listen to?
Like I said, stereotypical 24-year-old girl, true crime. But but I also love anywhere I can go and get information that I feel like is super digestible and applicable to what I'm doing. So, or things that I'm passionate about. So like a guy from actually not too far from where I was raised, his name's Jason Meadows. He has the Ag State of Mind podcast. It's about mental health in rural America and in the agriculture industry. And that's something I'm really passionate about. And I love to hear other people's stories. And then there's all kinds of podcasts that talk about what ranchers all across the country are doing that I can listen to and think, that's really smart. I think I should try to implement that on our operation. Or like the Cattlemen's Call podcast that NCBA puts on. My sister and my mom and I have been on that a couple times just because we connect with other women in agriculture that way. And so anywhere where I feel like I can go for information, entertainment, of course. I've also been responding a lot lately to the ads within those podcasts, because again, if they support something that I support, I want to kind of be on the same team with them. So, but then, yeah, just a resource if I'm going for information or if I'm going to learn more about a person that I want to connect with as a resource to me, and I can listen to them on the podcast and then follow them on Instagram and then DM them if I have a question or whatever that might be.
Right.
I've listened to Farm for Profit. I was on there once. They kind of have like new products come on board, and they have farmers come talk about stuff. And then the other day they had like an estate planner on there kind of talking about how you're moving from one generation to the next and how you're going to keep the farm going. And they're saying how that's something most guys don't want to talk about. And that's one of the problems in farming. So it was good to listen to and kind of learn about that and get some more information. So if something does happen, you're ready for it.
I would say I've only used podcasting for like ag purposes. I use a lot for true crime, but I use it for ag purposes. I would say in part of like my deep diving research is when I would use a podcast of like, okay, I've got an hour and I'm going to drive and I'm going to listen to this specific, like we have been conventional till for a long time and are changing some of our farms to no-till to just try a little bit different to control some weeds that we've got. So I listened to like 2 or 3 like no-till podcasts, and it was kind of dry at times, but you listen to those to get information kind of in the deep dive sections of when I do research or looking for equipment options. Well, okay, find somebody who's done a podcast on that. What equipment did they use to switch between the two, or have equipment that goes between the two practices, and to get another perspective. So,
yeah. One of the other things that we've touched on is certainly we're talking to, you know, the younger generation of farmers, and you've touched on it just a little bit of, you know, there's just differences in marketing or communicating to an older generation versus a younger generation producer. Maybe talk about some of those differences. Do you find you have to kind of vary your sales pitch or your message or your approach, and what are some of those ways in which you have to maybe vary it a little bit?
I still, when I take phone calls, when I am wrapping up, go, do you text? Because it's like, do you text enough that I can send you some of the information you just asked for in a written form where I don't have to call you back and talk for 30 minutes? Or do you need me to call you to give you that information and then you find a pen and you write it down? And we could have just texted that. But so I still find myself having to ask that question because a lot of my customers are still split. Like I've got a lot of guys that text, and then I've got a few guys that are like, no, call me back. It's like, okay, got it. But I think that's just how those customers want their information is still so different between generations. And even sometimes I still would rather somebody call than text, depending on what the information is. So knowing the differences between the generations and customers is something that a robot can't tell you. Like a computer can't tell you the difference between those things right off, but a human knows to ask, do you text, instead of just sending that information automatically.
Yeah, kind of just read them, and if they pull out an iPhone and they're pretty good on it, you can see that they're gonna want to text. And a lot of farmers, when you call them, they sound kind of grumpy or something. If they want to text, just text them the information, they'll get back with you, which is really nice. But when I was selling some quick pins that were in like magazines and stuff, I'd have some older people call. And a lot of people, they just want to talk to you, and enjoy that interaction and create that relationship. And the post office lost, I think, 2 packages, and these people kept calling me, and I was taking care of them. I kept sending them back, and I think we probably talked on the phone for probably over 2 hours on like 3 or 4 different phone calls. And I really got to know these people that live who knows how far away, and it was really cool. But yeah, you just gotta. You keep your customer happy and do what it takes to make the sale. So
I think back to a panel that I got to witness at an agricultural media summit, actually here in Kansas City last year. And they had 4 people on the panel from a few different areas. And I think there was like one in her 20s, one in his 30s, one in her 40s, and one in maybe her 60s. And it was so interesting to hear, just like you guys have said, the diversity of preferences between the ages. But it was also kind of interesting because they were all facing some of the same difficulties. Like, for example, rural internet. Some of them didn't have it, especially if they left their house and they were running fence rows. They couldn't get, they didn't have any internet. And so, and then a lot of them too that maybe worked in town or whatever that looked like, or were sitting in equipment. When they got home, they were done looking at screens. They were either, they might've been listening to the radio that day. Maybe they listened to the radio at night, or they were picking up a magazine or the newspaper. And it was kind of interesting to see that those things were universal across all ages. And so I think, again, it comes down to kind of knowing your target audience. And I think for so many agricultural companies, it's those young people who are getting into it and the people who have been in it for, 50 years, which I don't think anything I just said answered the question, but yeah, I think just kind of knowing where your people are, the accessibilities they have, and what it is going to take to reach them, again, kind of on an emotional, interpersonal level. If they feel like on the phone is the best way to do that, or again, some of the best conversations we have are in comment sections of Facebook posts. So yeah, like I said, sorry, that was probably.
I do want to take just a quick pause. So certainly if there's anybody that has questions, feel free to ask that. We have about 20 or so minutes left. And late breaking news, if you would like to ask a question and you're on the Zoom link, you'll need to unmute yourself. The chat feature is not working. So if you do have a question, we'll maybe turn it over to the Zoom link. First, if there's anybody in here that has a question, anything that you would like to ask?
One of the things so I'm kind of new to AdFarm is my first job in ag. So the amount of investment in new products that are being developed was something that I kind of thought like it's going to be red, the green, and that's what we're going to be advertising. So with new companies coming in or trying to sell you new products, or like a shift, if there's a biological company that would come to you to offer an insecticide that you hadn't been using before, something, what are kind of the ways that will stand out to you that will maybe make you change your mind or consider a new product?
I think seeing the numbers, I think that's really seeing the results of something that really helps. And I think one of the things with new products is, I know any generation, might try new products, but the younger generation is the most willing to try these new products, I think. And we just got some new range cubes in at work, and they're high in protein, and they have all these numbers, and we're posting it and putting it on the CAD register for the people to see. And then this guy came in and he bought 2 of my quick pins, and he bought the new range cubes, and he's probably like 30. And just seeing somebody like that, and I was talking to him about it, and he was excited to use the range cubes because he saw the numbers and everything they did, and the quick pin he saw because somebody had just burned up their tractor and baler, and he wanted to prevent that. So I think just seeing the numbers and results, and hopefully wanting to do better kind of helps.
Yeah, I definitely like my life runs on an Excel spreadsheet sometimes. Like I want to see the numbers and see if I mess with something, how does it affect the rest of what's going on, especially on our farming operation. I find that a really easy way to change things for like as an idea and then see what the result of that is. So yeah, I think quantitative things that I can look at and go, how is this going to change it? If I change this, what's my result hopefully going to be? And then yeah, it may or may not work when I put it into practice. This is even worth my time to try it, or is the margin too slim based on what I'm already doing?
Yeah, I do think the margins are so slim in so many areas of agriculture that being able to see how that's actually going to benefit you, kind of like Brittany was saying, I've preached on relationships, but if it's going to cost me a ton more and it's going to put my bottom line essentially at stake to invest in your product, or if you can't prove to me that's a good investment, then, it's going to be really hard for me to justify that cost. At the same time, if you and I have built a really good relationship and you promise, you have proof that that's going to pay off and that you're going to be there to kind of troubleshoot if I have questions, or you have a team that's there to support me, I think that is going to be worth a little bit more of an investment too.
Mhm. Is there a certain skepticism with new companies that they have to work to overcome? Or do you find that, whether it's a company you're familiar with or not familiar with, as long as they can produce the numbers or show the return, you're willing to try it? What's your sense on that?
I feel like if it goes back to the people, I think even though we are such a digital generation, it does go back to the people behind it. So if the people behind it are trustworthy, if I can call and get a real person when I need help with something, if I can call and get a real person to answer questions I have or whatever that looks like, as far as needing information about the product or whatever, as long as I can get that, the new doesn't scare me as much. I don't mind the idea of new. I just want them to be able to have human resources to answer the questions, not just, hey, send me an email and we'll get to it in 7 to 10 business days, because a lot of agriculture, 7 days, you miss a window to do something. Like we operate on too small of a calendar window to wait 10 days for an answer. Like that's just not helpful.
Yeah.
I think that's the advantage to the new and small company. When somebody calls, this is the owner, this is the partner, and they're going to be like, oh man, like we're talking to somebody who knows something, not just somebody who works for a company and they have to relay you to so many people. I think that's a huge plus and factor and a great selling point for new companies.
And also something to keep in mind for companies scaling, to not lose that. Like if you're a small company and I've been the one answering the phone and then all of a sudden it's somebody else, you're going to have a disconnect between those two, and your customer is going to feel like they got the short end of the stick when they don't get the same quality of treatment as that company grows.
Yeah, I think like said earlier, I think our generation is so open to trying new things. If there's something that you have that's going to make my life easier, that's going to increase my bottom line, that's going to improve the health of my herd or whatever that might be, I'm all ears, and I'm willing to invest in that. Again, if you can prove that it's going to be a good investment for me, or if it comes with a community of people who can help me make that investment pay off. So yeah, again, like Brittany said, it's those relationships.
Okay. Yeah.
Thanks so much for your time. Is a tool like an ROI calculator on a website something that you would engage with? Is that something that you think you can like we post numbers all day long? But is that something that you would like to plug in maybe with yourself and those things?
I think it would be helpful. For me personally, like I want to see where you got your calculator. So like what the factors you're using and how you're figuring that is helpful. But if I can just plug it in, yeah, that's way easier.
Yeah.
Yeah, Joy.
Last 2 years, big resounding theme with our clients is the word sustainability. Just curious what that word means to you guys and how it makes you feel when you hear that.
I think that's
Yeah, actually, before you answer, so just to repeat that question, the word sustainability has been thrown around a lot. what does that mean or what does that word mean for you? And what are some of those other maybe trends that you're closely watching or following?
So I guess for me, sustainability, when I say I'm a fifth generation farm, we've made it this far. So I at least have that. But sustainability for me means I want to leave it better than I found it. And I want to give my kids the opportunity to do what I did. That probably looks a little bit different because what sustains my family probably won't sustain their family in 20 years. That's got to adapt so that it will hold for their family and be available for them to live off of if they choose to in the future. But for me, that looks like making it one more generation. What do we have to do to take care of the land that we have, the livestock that we have, the equipment we have sometimes, because I still run equipment that my grandparents did. So what do I have to do to make sure that all of those aspects of our business are at least the same as I found them, but hopefully better? Can I invest in new equipment so that my kids don't have to do that part and don't have to replace 4 tractors at the same time or 4 pieces of tillage equipment the same year, or need tires on this and a whole new, like, to try and stagger that out so that it's sustainable for my kids to jump in and not have a huge burden when they start. For me, that's what that looks like kind of in a broad sense.
I'd say kind of just doing more with less. Seen a lot of guys, sustainability is a huge word being used in ag. I mean, doing rotational grazing, with our cattle, and using less chemical and less fertilizer, and using the cattle to kind of when I'm looking online and everything, we've been talking about this grazing, and it's kind of everybody's going back to what the buffalo did, before we were here. And it all makes sense why this intensive grazing works, because that's what was happening 300 or 400 years ago. But there's a lot of stuff just going back to old ways, using new kind of ways of technology to make things work, and being able to sustain it for the next generation, and I don't know, 50 to 80 years ago, 80 acres was what a farm, was on, and it could sustain the whole family, and they could make it work. But now you can't make it work. So you got to either grow or diversify and make it work with what you got, and keep going.
Like, I'm really glad you said that, because I think that the word sustainability is so big and kind of overarching, but I think there's a really definitive line between being sustainable and representing yourself as a sustainable business or a sustainable industry. I think so much of just what agriculture is based on sustainability, but so often we don't communicate that with our consumers, and ultimately they call the shots. If they don't think that we're doing things right, they're not going to buy our product. And so I think that as an agricultural company, if you can support your customers and your producers in making that journey either to sustainability or keep them on the track of sustainability in a way that the customers can kind of digest that too. So just essentially making things less scary for people who weren't born and raised in agriculture, I think, is such an important piece of being an agriculture company and an agricultural producer.
Yeah. We'll open it up if there's anybody on the Zoom link that would like to ask a question. I'm not sure where we'll hear it. Over the speakers, okay. They're shy, okay. Yeah. And perhaps while they're thinking of some questions, we've talked a little bit about sustainability, and even along with sustainability, there's no end of, kind of new trends happening in agriculture, sustainability initiatives, but regenerative agriculture and conservation tillage and rotational grazing. And, there's a number of things that people are exploring, and there's being more discovered all the time. Maybe just give us a sense of, what are some of the things that you're really paying attention to or excited about or want to explore more as you're thinking about the future of your agricultural operation?
So I think that so much of what we do on our ranch is exactly what the generations before us did. And that's kind of, where I was coming from as far as the difference between being sustainable and presenting yourself as sustainable, because, you know, like not that much of the cattle industry. And actually, I'll say, so at Young Farmers and Ranchers Conference a couple years ago, I saw an individual speak from I think South Missouri, Worthington, Angus, and they got up there and they were showing pictures of, you know, the generations before us doing row crops and kind of you know, the old equipment, or maybe it was like a horse-drawn plow or whatever. And then compared to today, this huge, impressive equipment and all the amazing technology we have. And then they showed pictures of the generations before us running cattle and grazing cattle. And then they showed pictures of how we do that today. And it was essentially the same. And so I think, again, we were doing something right, of course, if it's worked in that way. And I think there have been so many improvements as far as efficiency and genetics and all of those things. But those aren't always, again, easily digestible from consumers. And there's so many technologies in crops and livestock that are really helping us return resources to our land and to our animals and to the earth and to the environment. But if you're not the one there doing that, or you're not seeing the technology or seeing the returns, then that might just look like you're exploiting our resources. And so I think it is, again, really important that as producers, we take advantage of those technologies, but that we also are able to communicate the purposes of those technologies so that, again, our end consumers that are essentially calling the shots get to understand that and be a part of that in a way that makes them more confident in what it is that we're doing.
I think something that we're seeing like a lot of producers go toward is like the producer to consumer, straight through making your own product and getting it to them. I really think that's going to be something big and a way for smaller producers to really stay in the industry and create that relationship with these customers. And because once you create that and they like your product, they're going to come back. I mean, we just raise a few steers and sell to like our neighbors and family. And people who have our beef that have never had it and only go to the store, I mean, they go crazy over it. And our beef is nothing special. My roommate, they raise cattle too. And like he would bring some of his back when we were in college. And man, I thought ours was good. Well, his was good. And everybody thought ours was super good. So I mean, just once you create that relationship and get it to people who've never had it before and show them what you do and why you do it, I mean, people really love that and enjoy it.
I think what you asked, like what is coming that we are kind of keeping an eye on. For me, part of my work with Farm Bureau is looking at what the carbon credit situation is going to look like. But part of me thinks, okay, so we're going to deep dive into this. We still don't really even know what's going on, but we're going to deep dive into this. And as soon as we kind of figure out what's going on, there's going to be something else coming at us. So I think one of the biggest things that we have to juggle, especially young, trying to figure out all of producing food in the first place, is there's all these new things coming at us. And as soon as you kind of focus in on one and go, okay, I'm going to figure this out, by the time you figure it out, there's something new that was a bigger deal than what you just spent all that time figuring out. So I think it is going to be increasingly important for us to have a way to digest the whole into pieces that we can deal with and understand how that affects our operation for each of those big topics, and have them like that information easily accessible to us for whatever that topic is, so that if it's that, great, we can take that building block and go deeper and figure out how it actually affects us. But if it's not that one, we have a decent idea of that, but we can focus and grab this building block and go, no, this is where I need to focus, and figure out how that's going to affect us. The problem is we don't really know what's going to be thrown at us, because every day somebody in DC could decide, hey, I think we're going to do this. And like, holy cow, that makes a difference on what we do here.
Mhm. So kind of along those lines, are there threats to agriculture that kind of keep you up at night? Talked a little bit about DC and just regulation, but just what are some of the things that you think about that you think may be a challenge in the future, or things that you kind of worry about?
To me, I see a push for food that does not come from traditional agriculture sources as a big threat, because I still think there is a possibility that somebody far enough removed from agriculture is going to wake up one day and go, I don't want to eat food that comes from animals or plants or whatever. I think I want to eat food that comes from a different source. And enough of those people together can change what we have to do. Now, is that the end of the world? No, probably not. Like, we will adapt and figure it out. But for me, we have worked for 5 generations to get to this point where we can produce food on somewhat of a level that is sustainable for our family, that gives us enough money to live off of, that produces enough food that I feel like we're making a difference in the marketing that we do. So it's kind of scary to me that all of a sudden everybody could just decide, hey, we're not gonna eat food like that anymore because we don't think that you're doing a good job. Like, that scares me to think that people wouldn't think I was doing a good enough job at what I do to turn to an alternative source for their food.
Yeah, we were just, my last semester of college, we were reading a book, and there's just me, 2 ag guys, me and my buddy, in an entrepreneurship class, and it said by 2030, all of the meat was gonna be like synthetically produced or something, and he looked at us and we were like, we don't agree with that, of course. And I think, I don't know, it's tough. We got a long ways to go to make sure that doesn't happen. But I mean, with all the food shortages and stuff that have happened, I mean, it really makes you nervous for the supply chain and stuff like that. And I really think I want to make a big push for just like local produce and meats and stuff like that, and getting any type of ag producer to get their stuff straight to the consumer and kind of cut out the middlemen and not have to worry about that stuff. I mean, it's not going to be easy, and there's a reason we have a lot of people to feed big cities and stuff, but there's a lot of that can be improved and help the farmers make more money, and not have to worry about going to the grocery store and the shelves being empty.
I consider growing up in agriculture such a blessing for so many different reasons. But one of the big ones is because I feel like if I hadn't, it would be terrifying to be a consumer right now. With all of the marketing and the labels and the scare tactics that are going on in the food industry. Like, it always kind of confused me how people would be so reluctant to receive totally safe technology like GMOs, but they were so open-minded to something like lab-grown meat. But whenever you're constantly bombarded with all of these mixed signals, how do you make a decision or have any discernment between, what's natural or what you should be open to? And I think about our director of agriculture, Christian, here in Missouri. She tells a story about when she was in some big city and there was a woman and she there was some situation surrounding essentially that she was buying organic food, but it was costing her so much that she got to feed her child, but she wasn't getting to eat herself. But somebody had told her that if she fed non-organic food to her kid, then she was a bad mom. So she was choosing to starve herself for the betterment of her kid, when in reality, they could have both eaten on essentially the same dime. And not that there's anything against organic, but that's the cool part about being in a world where there's so many choices, is that if conventional is better for your budget, buy conventional. You can both eat. But she had been scared so badly that she was starving for her kid. And that just breaks my heart because she's not the only one. And the organic versus conventional, or, we hear a lot of grass-fed versus corn-fed or whatever that is. So I think this has been a trend forever. It's just that closing that gap between the consumer and the producer, and empowering producers to tell their stories, and creating judgment-free zones for consumers to come ask questions or come visit operations or come see your technology or whatever that might be, where they just feel like they can find that information that's less biased, that's less terrifying, and can help them as they go forward and try to make these decisions for not only themselves, but their families.
Thank you. With that, I know we're at time. I could have this conversation all day. So thank you so much. You've been wonderful individuals to talk to. Thank you for coming and participating. Hopefully everybody else found some value out of it. But again, I think for a lot of you, you'll be available all day. So we get the opportunity to have more conversation with you. which I'm sure we'll do, continue to ask you questions. But Brittany, Blake, and Macey, thank you so much for your time. Thank you for coming, and thank you for your perspectives.
Thank you.